First, we want to give you sort of a short overview of the current situation in Sweden. We are from the Swedish ICT Research Institute. We work in a part that is called Acreo. It is focused more on broadband technology. But we have more and more been focusing on the impact of broadband. So next slide, please. We made this study, and we got a question from this broadband commission. Could you see if there is any investment, what that will bring back to the society? If we invest €1, what will the society get back in 1 year, 5 year and 10 year? And it would be very complicated to do that. Especially because that has not been fiber long enough to make a study like this. But we searched for some evidence and put it into calculation, and we will give you a few examples on this. If you look on this picture, you can see the complicated situation. You have the cost of rolling out, and to balance this, the investors do a return of investment calculation, and if it's lower, like in this case, they will not build. But how do they measure that the return is lower than the investment cost? Well, they look on traditional ARPU, the traditional triple play, and the traditional uptake. Could you? Yeah. And besides that, they also have a copper investment that they want to squeeze a few more euros out of it, which make it really complicated. And this is what it's all about. We are still in the telco trap. Try to measure the development of the new society with a 100-year-old business model from telcos. Next. You see the blue one on the top. We found something that we call the uncaptured values. That is things that you don't see on the operator's business case. First of all, we didn't care about broadband, because broadband has been hijacked by the operators, and they call everything for broadband. Every connection to the internet is sort of explained to be some kind of broadband, which it's not. So we said, let's skip it. We go for the fiber, because someone else said today that fiber is the only future-proof solution, and that is also the only solution that could deliver the services that is in the next step. Just something very short. We have 175 city networks in our country. It's networks that is owned by the municipalities. 3/3 of all the investments in fiber in our country is made by municipalities. It's not incumbents. They are not doing any investment. They're starting to catch up, but very slow. Why did the municipalities do this? Well, because they were left behind. The operators were not willing to invest in our rural areas. So the municipalities said that we have to do it by ourselves to be able to survive. So they started to roll out this municipal network. But they did not do it because of profit. They did it because they want to change the society. And that is really a new situation. This is not telco anymore. It's infrastructure for the society. I will just give a few examples into this. We have the large city of Stockholm. They just work with dark fiber. They don't have any communication, not any services. Any operator and any enterprise can lease dark fiber in that network. And there is 100 operators that lease that network. And of course, if 100 operators could share the network, it is cheaper. And besides the operators, there is 500 enterprises also use this network. So of course, since we heard that the cost is to deploy the network and 80% is the digging, it is really brilliant to have a shared network. So that's why Stockholm is the most fiber city in the world. And the competition has driving the prices of dark fiber down. And we have another example, a very small municipality, really a remote and rural area. They have just 15 inhabitants per square kilometers. No operator were interested to invest anything. So they said, well, there's two choices. Either we die, because the enterprises will move, or we deploy our own fiber. So they did. They rolled out their own fiber. Besides this 175 city networks, we have more than 200 village networks. That is cooperative, something like Malcolm explained. As local initiatives where people in the village build their own network and connect it to the national network. But that's just a background on this investigation that we made to see what are the impact of the fiber. And the first we could see is when you build a network, you are hired people to do that. They get salary, they pay taxes, you have more of employment.
So first we try to identify a little bit, like in general terms, what these benefits would be, and then we try to measure if any of these benefits are actually visible already today in the networks that have been deployed. So yeah, basically one thing that we looked at is higher employment. As Crister said, some of the higher employment is generated just by building the network, and this is something that would appear building anything, could be a road or a bridge. But then you have some indirect effects stemming from the fact that you are actually deploying high-speed access, and the new services can lead, for example, to distance working, which is a way of virtual labor mobility, which in turn can increase employment.
And a fact behind this is that when you have a fiber connection, 20% work part-time from your home. If you have copper, it's just 5%. So there is really a big difference when you deploy fiber. People can work part-time from their home. And of course that has the impact also on the environment and on the traffic congestion and all that.
So employment is impacted by a number of phenomena that are dependent on the fiber deployment. Easy to do business, so you have new ICT and also traditional businesses, etc. But all these things are often talked about, but can we actually observe this in the networks that have been deployed? So what we did is we asked the question, has any employment improvement been seen? And we tried to answer that by running a statistical study of all the municipalities in Sweden, including those that deployed fiber and those that did not deploy fiber, and different municipalities have deployed different degrees of fiber, so different penetration rates. And we took the data of fiber penetration in 2007, and we looked at a number of socioeconomic factors in 2007 and 2010, and we looked at how these factors have changed over this time period. And this was a way to remove backward causalities so that you wouldn't have effects of fiber penetration depending on the municipality having a good economic situation or whatever. We want to see the other way around. And what we found after 3 years, so remember, these are many of these effects are quite long term, so we were not even sure that we would be able to see anything after 3 years, but we did. So these are all the municipalities plotted on the scatter plot, and with different penetration rates on the x-axis and change of employment on the y-axis. So you see there's a lot of noise, of course, but if you run some regression analysis, then you're able to obtain a statistical correlation between the fiber penetration in 2007 and the change of employment between 2007 and 2010. And what we observed is that within 95% confidence interval, a 10% increase in fiber penetration leads to 0.1% increase in employment, which doesn't sound very much. It doesn't sound anything significant really, but it's interesting to put numbers on these percentages. 10% increase in fiber deployment in Sweden is roughly 600 million euros, and 0.1% increase in employment is about 120 million euros per year. So this is something that is accumulated, and this is after 3 years. So many of these effects probably are becoming stronger when new services become available and new ways of working and thinking become commonplace.
Yeah, and you have to consider also that this investment has to be depreciated over 20 years.
The second thing that we looked at was the effect on forced migration, let's say. The reason to look at this effect was that a lot of the rural municipalities have problems with people leaving the town and moving to the big cities. It's a big source of social and also economic imbalances, because you can't just shut down the school because 30% of the kids have left. So you still have to pay for a lot of those services, and you have less tax revenue. So we ran pretty much the same analysis. I will skip all the details here of all the different effects.
Could I just add something there? Could you go back one slide just again? Yeah, perceived quality of life. People that has fiber is happier than the people that has copper. Of course, it depends on how you measure what makes people happy, but they have less trouble, less call to the customer services. It works better, more stable, not so much trouble. So we are quite sure when we say that fiber users are much more happy than the copper users.
So again, going to the results of regression, the same type of scatter plot, and this time you see that a 10% increase in fiber penetration leads to 0.25% in population change between 2007 and 2010. If you try to put numbers on this in terms of euros, it's a bit more difficult. What is the revenue for the municipality for preventing 0.25% of the population to move away from the municipality? But it's anyways quite an interesting fact. And then there are other effects due to the fact that you have a new infrastructure, which has been talked about before. This can be seen in terms of increased market value. People start looking at whether an apartment is fiber connected or not, for example, because people put value on that. But also, and maybe more interestingly, is that putting down a whole new infrastructure, going away from the copper network, gives new opportunities to move to more advanced business models, to open networks, etc., which leads to increased competition, and with all the advantages of higher competition in terms of service offers and prices. And in fact, right now we are working on a study to see what the effects of open access is on prices, and we are still refining the results of this study, but we are seeing a clear correlation between number of service providers offered on a network and price. And just to give some ideas, yes, this increased market value, there is an agreement between tenants association and the housing companies, putting a price tag of €5 per month per apartment if fiber is available. And savings because of competition, because now municipalities and regional councils are able to negotiate better terms for their data and telecommunication services. And just to give some ideas, the typical prices for 100 meg symmetrical in Sweden are between 20 and 35 euros per month, which is probably due to the fact that there is a lot of competition allowed by the fact that there are open networks which can be put there because it's a new infrastructure. It's not owned by one operator offering their services.
when you have an open tender, you get more competition than if you buy a bundle service from someone that also owns the infrastructure. For the case of Stockholm, and I've been working for the city of Stockholm, so I know these figures, the saving is 4.5 million euro every year in lower cost for communication, which goes directly back to the taxpayers.
So we took at least those effects that we were able to quantify, and it was probably a limited set, and we tried to answer the question that the government had asked us: what is the return of one invested Swedish crown after 1, 5, and 10 years? And yeah, maybe you want to take over again and conclude this presentation.
It's a bit complicated, of course, because the return is not coming back to the investors. And that is a problem. But as you can see here, already after 3.5 years, we reach break even. And after 5 years, we have 1.5 times back of the money. So we think this is really a good investment. I used to work with cable TV, and then we are discussing 7 years before we reach break even. So I think this is really good. But if we accept this situation, if we accept this uncaptured value situation, it ends up that we need a new business model. Because it's not really unfair. It's not really fair. It's really unfair to have a situation that someone do the investment, but the return of investment is coming back somewhere else. So we need a new model that include both the investors, the net owners, and the society, which is, as we heard earlier today, a public-private partnership. And as long as you treat the infrastructure as just infrastructure and that the market use it, that's something that is natural for municipalities and regions to do. They always invest in roads and streets, but they don't drive the cars or the taxis or the lorries. They let the market handle that. But I have never heard any politicians ask for a business case before they deploy a road. Never. Because it's an obligation to do it. And if we consider dark fiber to be the new roads for the society, it must be an obligation. And then let the market handle the active part of the communication and deliver the services in competition. And if we put down enough dark fiber, every operator in the world could be in every cable, so we can have really a freedom of choice for the end consumer, and it will drive the prices down. And we can also see from the studies that we made that when you have open networks, there is more variation of the services, and of course it's lower prices. A study made by the city of Stockholm showed that the price on dark fiber are really low in Stockholm compared to all the other cities in the world.